Hi. Right, this is part 12 of Anima Mundi, the search for the world soul for EA Zoom. And I'm Michaela Villiers-Kendall, and it's December the 9th, 2021. So, okay. This has been difficult because this is very complicated, but I do my best. Last time in part 11, in our fool's journey through the labyrinth in order to search for the world soul, we dipped our toes into room 237. I won't go into it, but if you've seen the other parts, or at least the last part, you'll understand that the Shining film is the backdrop to our search, and it gives a really wonderful map, because otherwise you'd just be completely lost. And Kubrick is a wonderful pan leading us on through the maze. And I'm the fool, I guess, but then never mind. Won't go there. Okay, so part 12, and this is called Aphrodite's Revenge, the Eye of Ra. The reason it's called Aphrodite's Revenge is, well, I'll go into that, but in the last part, we discovered the apple of chaos, the golden apple of chaos that was rolled into the Apollo sequence of room 237. If you've seen the movie, that helps, but you can always look it up after. And we've got a few slides. So anyway, so Eris, the goddess Eris, in the myth, rolled the golden apple up to Danny, who was in the role of Apollo, the god. And he was in the act of raising the Jed column. And I'll go over that slightly again. I don't want to repeat myself. It's very difficult because putting these parts together, because it is an underlying story. It's a fugue, as I said before in the last parts, that's an underlying story as presented in Hamlet's Mill, the book, which I've talked about, which many films, many plays, long before, many books, many stories, many mythologies had these underlying stories. And the thing about them is they give the deeper meaning. They are the labyrinth. They are the underworld of the story. And now we see them a lot in the films. In fact, to a good film, there's always an underlying story, a fugue. But this is a very intricate one, and it actually goes for the heart. It goes for the absolute center of mythology. And so he's taken on a very big subject here, but it's brilliantly done. And as an astrologer, it's great fun, and it's very challenging, and it brings all your astrological skills in, as we know, to interpret and to follow a chart. And I guess that stands me in some stead, even though it's a huge challenge. But anyway, I'll get on with it. So Aphrodite's Revenge, the Eye of Ra. I'm going to read exactly from my notes, because otherwise I'm going to get completely lost and end up in another blind alley in the maze, and we don't want that. Right. So I'm going to start with a bit of an explanation, an introduction, because why Aphrodite's Revenge? I'm going to look very, very briefly at the poem Lamia. And it's a very old poem. This is a painting depicted Lamia. Lamia is a nymph. She's a serpent. So if any of you, I'm sure lots of you, if you're your astrologers, know about how the serpent is very entwined, you could say, with the mythology of the moon and the feminine and Venus. And it's again at the heart of mythology, and has been much maligned. And that's the point of this poem, that Lamia has been maligned, and she stands for the lost ancient wisdom. Lamia is a poem, it's a narrative and a poem by John Keats. So it's a 19th century poem, but it's beautiful, but it's so long. It's very, very long. And I won't really go into any of it, although just to say what it's about. And this nymph, she bathes in the forest. So if you've seen room 237, the scene, there is a bathing girl in the bath. And that's the first meaning. There are several different meanings in this labyrinth of the same scene, as there have been in other scenes, and also the roles are multiple roles for each character. And in fact, there's even multiple roles for objects like the golden ball, the yellow ball. So it gets very confusing, but that's why it's very important to just stay to the narrative. And if you stay on Kubrick's path, I found, very carefully following his thread, then you won't go astray. But it's still very difficult. Anyway, so I hope you understand what I'm on about, because it's not Kubrick, you know, Kubrick's done this brilliantly, but my role as an interpreter might sort of come short, but I will try. Anyway, so it's very well worth knowing what his underlying meaning now is, very, very well worth pursuing. It's profound. So anyway, so Lamia is bathing in the forest. Hermes comes across her. He pursues her, and then somehow someone else pursues her. Who's that? It's a very long poem, but anyway, a young man pursues her. First Hermes, and it turned out he was actually doing it for this young man. He was finding Lamia. So this young man asks Hermes if he's found the maid, and Hermes said he has. And he goes and he finds the young man, the knight in this picture, finds the maid and kisses her as a room 237, and falls in love with her. And they have a marriage feast. But unfortunately, Apollonius, who's a Roman philosopher, is invited, and she fears that because she's already an outsider. She's lost all her heritage, which is it's an analogy for the lost connection with the ancient world, and that it's been dissed. It's been worse than that. It's been burned, even called heresy, and then the wonderful wisdom and knowledge gnosis has been lost to the world, and that's the sadness. It's a very sad poem, but it's beautiful. And anyway, it ends though with Apollonius accusing her, finding out that she's a serpent, and threatening to destroy her, and she is turned then into a monster, as in room 237, when the young girl is kissed, but then she becomes a hag, a crone, and the beauty is gone and lost of it all. So it's very beautiful, but I won't go any further about that. But the point of Aphrodite's revenge is that Aphrodite, the goddess of love, as the Eye of Ra, and I'll explain that, avenges Ra, avenges evil, and shut minds and wrong thinking and all of that stuff. But anyway, I'll read my notes and carry on with the next one. Hold on. Oh yeah, that's it. Just bear with me because I haven't done this. Hold on. How do I get the next one?
Try the down arrow.
Down arrow. Oh, I've lost it. Oh, no.
The arrow on your keyboard.
Oh gosh, where's it gone? Sorry, I haven't done this before. Not technically. Let's see. Oh gosh, where's it? Hi. Okay, sorry about that little glitch, technical glitch, but anyway, we're back again. So a brief overview to give a wider perspective before we go further into this. This is the start of the film of The Shining. This is the yellow VW on its way. Actually, that road is called, as I've said before, the Road of the Sun. So the VW in this case actually represents the sun. Now, the Apollo sequence leading into 237, there is a yellow ball, as I put down there, yellow VW corresponds to a car, and there are other cars in the film. It is a car, but it corresponds to the yellow ball. So that's how he operates in connecting. That's how mythology always operated. It connects one thing to another in order to give its deeper meaning. So, and obviously that's what we do in astrology all the time. So it represents a car, which is one of the cars. It represents the yellow ball. So there's the connection. It represents the golden apple, which we mentioned last time in part 11. It represents the sun, as it is here, on the root of the sun, and it represents a horse. So, you know, it represents a horse as the other cars. All the other cars represent the horse, but this is the only one that actually represents the ball because it's yellow, and the apple and the sun. So there we are. It also represents a stage of alchemy, because Jung, in the last part, we were exploring Jung's Red Book, which actually is part of 237 as well. And he, on page 237 of the practice of psychotherapy, he actually has the picture of the conjunctio, which is the alchemical marriage, the alchemical wedding. And that is basically what 237 is about. And it's the psychotherapy of that, as well as the mythology of it, as well as the alchemical process and meaning. The search for gold. I mean, that's what basically the film is. It's the pursuit of gold, which is the higher self, the transcendent self, and the gold of the knowledge, the ancient knowledge that leads to that. And that's what Jung was talking about. They talked about it in iron as well. Anyway, also it represents, lastly, the typewriter, meaning the yellow typewriter. It's not in the film, but in a film about the film, Kubrick actually on purpose, obviously, used a yellow typewriter. So he's trying to make a connection there with the car and with the yellow ball. And that gives you the meaning of it. Eventually, doesn't always at first, but eventually it clicks. And that's the whole point too that he's making too, that's how the mythologies worked. That's how the constellations, that's how astrology works and alchemy works and psychotherapy, that you make the connections, and your not just your brain, as he was talking about, you know, the left brain and the right brain, yes, it connects as in meditation, but it connects the meaning. And the more you connect the meaning, then the more you get of more meaning. And it's a sort of thing that then starts to take over synchronistically, as Jung was saying. So anyway, the yellow typewriter, and that's another connection. Anyway, so that's what it's connected to. I'm not going to get far with this, I can see. It's taking longer than I thought, but never mind, you know, get as far as we can. So the overview of the Overlook, which is the Overlook Hotel. And this is the car, okay, this is the yellow VW, the sun. Okay, what is the fugue underlying the film of The Shining primarily about, and what is the main narrative? And so here we are back to the opening title sequence with the yellow VW climbing the mountain road of the Road of the Sun. In the background, that wonderful music, Desiree is playing, and that's the Day of Wrath. And that also refers to Judgment Day, and it refers to Faust as well. It's used in Faust. So Judgment Day, the Day of Wrath, we start to get a meaning, and this is the sun. So what is this? This is a sun, this is the sun heading towards Judgment Day. Right, so the yellow VW mirrors the yellow ball at the beginning of the Apollo sequence, as I said, of room 237. And that beckons Danny to enter the room. And because of what the door to room 237 represents is Daleth, which is the door in, as I've explained before, the paths on the tree of life. And I've explained that many times, so I'm not going to again, but it's the paths on the tree of life, because the hotel actually represents the labyrinth, which also represents the tree of life. But it also represents the tree of death. That's the other side to it. And that's why we start. And 237 is actually the entrance to the Qliphoth, the tree of death, which is called Dath, and it's reached by Daleth, the door. So he's very cleverly got the door opened to him now. The ball, the sun inviting him into the void, the abyss of the Qliphoth, the tree of death. And what the ball invites him to is the descent. So we can take it that in this respect, the VW and the ball both symbolize the sun on its journey around the zodiac. The path, it's called in ancient Egyptian, which we've had actually as the VW next time came up the mountain. It had Horus, which is Danny. He took the role of Horus. Osiris was Jack, and Wendy was Isis, making the triad, the ancient Egyptian triad. So they're connectors as well to this. So the ball then is telling you this is about them too. Okay, so the path of the ecliptic around the wheel of the zodiac, but also the great wheel of the procession of the sun through the ages. So you've got the wheel of the zodiac, but then you've got the great wheel of the zodiac. And as seen as Danny, as Horus, circumvented the halls of the hotel on his big wheel. So, he's got a sense of humor about that, Kubrick. It was called, the tricycle is called a big wheel. So he goes round and round, as we know, around the hotel, and that's him circumventing the zodiac wheel. And it's wonderful for astrologers, all of this, but then it would be, wouldn't it? So he's got his head above the capstone, above the capstone, above the backrest, which is in the shape of the capstone. So that represents Horus's head on the horizon, Aries, the start of the zodiac of the great wheel. That's the equinoctial point of 0 degrees, which is the alpha of both wheels, and the great wheel of time, set amongst the stars, planets, and constellations of the sky. So procession is the vast background theme of the film, and the sun's journey around the great wheel. So we're seeing that in the opening sequence, that's basically what it's about. That's the broad meaning. Procession, as I said, is the heart of the labyrinth, and through which the search of the Anima, Mundi, the world soul, must take place. So the yellow ball of the sun lures us down at this point. It lures us in the next, and actually, I'll put up the next thing now. Yeah. Ah, I did it. Okay, so so here's the yellow ball. This is the Apollo scene with the Apollo sweater, and there's Danny in the middle. He has 9 cars, which represents, I said before, but it's worth just saying, the 9th Sephiroth, which is Yesod, which is ruled by the moon, Apollo, the Apollo moon landing. And he's, of course, Apollo, he's Horus and Apollo, and he's the god of the sun. So there is the yellow ball inviting him into room 237. The 9 cars have another meaning as well. In fact, they have several, just like everything else. And in this case, it's the Enid. Enid? I think you pronounce it that way. The Enid is 9 gods of ancient Egypt. And I won't name the 9s because I haven't got them listed, but it does include obviously Osiris at the top, Isis, Horus, Thoth, Set, all of them. Ra, obviously Ra is actually higher, the main god, Atum Ra. So there's 9 of them, and that's the Enid, and those are those 9 cards, as well as the moon, Sephiroth, Yesod. Okay, so what else do I have to say about that? Okay, so the yellow ball of the sun lures us down at this point in our fool's journey. as we have passed the fall equinox on the wheel of the horoscope, and are sinking along with the sun. So in the film, we have passed November 1st, which was Halloween. And at that point, the Pleiades, at that time in history, 3,000 years ago, when the Giza pyramids were built, the Pleiades had their heliacal rising on November 1st, which is why it's called All Souls Day. In fact, it's one of the cross quarter days, as many of you will know already. So it's a very sacred day in pagan philosophy. So we've passed that, and we're sort of down. So we're going down, and I'll just, before I move on, mention again that the carpet design is indicative of the eternal return. So it's talking about history repeating itself is the basis of this too. The wheel goes round, events repeat. Okay, so right, okay, and there's the wheel. So this is the Great Wheel. It's got a lot of information on there, actually. And it shows how, obviously, at the horizon, at the ascendant, the sun goes upward. Obviously, you'll know, if you're experienced astrologers, that the precessional sun goes in a clockwise direction, whereas in the zodiac wheel, the yearly zodiac wheel, it goes anti-clockwise. So it reaches its zenith, it crosses the horizon, it's resurrected. The precessional sun and the yearly sun is resurrected in the spring equinox, Aries, where the cross is there, the red cross, and it reaches its high point at the summer solstice of 0 degrees Cancer. And that's called the gates of hell, because at that point, it's reached its highest point, and then it starts its descent. It starts its descent, it starts to fall, and then it reaches fall at the autumn equinox, which is 0 degrees Libra, where the red cross, the other side of the western side, is indicated. And then at that point, and that's in the film where we've just passed that, because we're on November 1st, we know that. And so now we are descending into the dark. We're descending into the darkest time, the darkest part of the zodiac wheel. And we're heading for 0 degrees Capricorn, which is the winter solstice. A midnight hour, midnight. Noon is the high point. Okay, dawn obviously is east, is Aries, the equinox, spring equinox, and fall is twilight, 6 p.m. sunset, and that comes into this, of course. So, right, so in this, though, you can see that this is the Great Wheel, and you can see the X is marking the start, in fact, of the age of Pisces. So this is depicting the start of the age of Pisces, when the precessional sun entered Pisces, which is the time of Christ. After that, it's, before that, as we know, it's before Christ, BC, and after that, it's AD, it's after Christ, Anno Domini, after Christ. So this depicts that time, the start of the age of Pisces. Okay, so I'll go on to the next one. Oh, hell, heaven is Cancer, 0 up on noon, the highest point is heaven, down below is hell, which is also Darth, which is also the void, the abyss. Okay, right. Okay, so then that's describing, I won't linger on that, but that's for your information, that's describing the precession and the religious structures. It's a little bit complicated, but it's really interesting, and you can see, yeah. Okay, I won't go into that now, but that's for the information. Right, okay, so precession is the vast background theme of the film and the sun's journey around the Great Wheel. Precession is the heart of the liberator. Okay, I said that. Right, so on the Fool's Journey begins as the sun crosses the the ascendant, the equinoctic point of 0 degrees Aries. That's when the fool's journey begins. And that's in the tarot, because the tarot is used, he used the tarot in this as well, which is obviously connected along with the chakras with the tree of life, the Kabbalah. Right, so we're sinking along with the sun towards the winter solstice of room 237. I wonder if we'll actually get in here there at this rate, but never mind. It has, you know, unfortunately you can't miss the parts because it's all relative to each other. So in part 12, we discovered the ball to represent the golden apple of mythology, tempting Dani, Horus, Apollo into chaos, because it was the golden apple of chaos. The myth of Eris throwing the golden apple towards the crowd that had snubbed her, bearing the inscription "for the fairest." Eris is the wicked queen. Fairy tales are all based on mythology, and obviously we see the wicked queen in the apple indicated in this. So the apple is then given by Paris to the goddess out of three, goddess of three that he judges, goddesses of three that he judges to be the fairest, which turns out to be Aphrodite. So Aphrodite wins the golden apple. So hence that's why she's holding the golden apple in the title slide of this. So kicking off the chaos of the Trojan War, it all leads to that. So it's basically about the golden apple is chaotic in this respect. It's not always. So meaning the processional sun is also chaotic, that particularly at times of the cusp, when the processional sun is leaving a sign of the age and entering a new age, as we are now. In fact, we're on the cusp of Pisces, of the end of Pisces leading on to the cusp of Aquarius. We haven't reached there yet, but we're on the cusp, and that point is a won't say chaos, but it can be, it's a point of upheaval, huge upheaval, in fact, it can be. So we find ourselves there now, but then we found ourselves 2,000 years ago when Pisces crossed into, Aries crossed into Pisces. So, okay, so, right. Dani's pole of Apollo, god of the sun, now is shown to consist of the pole and the axis Mundi, the world, the axis of the world. So Apollo represents that. I'll just go on to the next one. So that's Hathor or Hathor, the eye of Ra. This is another image of, in fact, Hathor is the earlier version of Aphrodite. So as you can see, she's rising from the sea, but this time not in a lovely shell. It's not so great, but she's holding the golden apple. So this is the golden apple of chaos she's holding. And this is the other side of Aphrodite, Venus, and as the eye of Ra. So, okay, Hathor is also one of the Ennead, the gods, the 9 gods. Okay, so the axis also represents the tree of life, the spine of mankind. So with the chakras, which the Kundalini travels up, the Jed column of ancient Egypt, and the caduceus of Hermes. So they all represent the same thing, the axis, the spine. Which is represented by Dani standing up with the Apollo rocket. The Apollo rocket is indicative of all of that, the axis. So anyway, so Lilith took on the role of the wicked queen in part 12. Halloran as Elijah in that respect, because that's one of his roles, as I've said before in the other parts, had some dealings with her in the Bible, and she made an appearance with him in the Red Book. And also, of course, she's a member of the demons and devils and of the Qliphoth. And so we are, in going into room 237, we are entering through Dath, the Qliphoth. And Lilith was the first demon we met because of the choking poster, Dani having been strangled. And also, as I won't go into it because I described it in part 11. So Halloran was Elijah in that respect. But now, I've said, and we can recall that she had some interaction with an apple too, but we're not going to that at the moment, but we probably will in a later part because Kubrick goes into that as well in Genesis. Anyway, it's right. So, and that will be addressed hopefully in part 13 if we get that far, but it might be a later part. Anyway, but for now, just to bear in mind that the golden apple is the sun, and to make things even more confusing, the sun in this part is an eye, the eye of Ra. So it's also an eye. I should have mentioned that, shouldn't I? It's also an eye. Okay, so the eye of Ra specifically is actually the goddess, and the goddess is it's not only Hathor, who is the ancient Aphrodite, Venus, obviously represented by Venus, who rules Netzach, the seventh Sephiroth, which is room 237. But Venus is the morning and evening star that heralds or follows the sun's journey around the wheel of the zodiac. So the Venus either goes before the sun or follows the sun, but is the companion of the sun and the protector in this case, then called the Eye of Ra. I mean, ancient Egyptian lore is so intricate and so clever, and that's what Kubrick is trying to point out here, that that's all been sort of dissed like Lamia. Not just ancient Egyptian, obviously, it's all of it, Mesopotamian, Babylonian, Sumerian, and world myths as well, and all using the constellations, and all of them knowing about evidence, obviously, that they all knew about precession thousands of years ago. So, you know. Okay, so Hathor was also the goddess of the moon in ancient Egypt, and she was represented by the cow. There is a cow painting with the full moon, a picture in the Boulder apartment at the start of The Shining, which indicates Hathor. So Hathor corresponds with Aphrodite in Greek mythology, and so Hathor, Aphrodite, is in this sense the Eye of Ra. I'll just say a little bit about the Eye of Ra. She's the protector of Ra, who is the supreme sun god, and she comes out to defend Ra, and her wrath, she produces chaos in the defense of Ra. If evil deeds are done, then or the kingdom is betrayed, then the goddess, the eye as she is, comes out. So she, it says here, in a temple ritual, the pharaoh played a ceremonial game in honor of the eye goddesses, Hathor, Sekhmet. They also represent the eye of Ra, but mostly Hathor, in which he struck a ball symbolizing the eye of Epep, another eye. Epep is the serpent of chaos. So he struck a ball symbolizing the eye of Epep with a club made from a type of wood that was said to have sprung from the eye of Ra. The ritual represents the battle of Ra's eye with its greatest foe. And we can see that's how we know this. This is one of the reasons we know this is what this is about, because Jack was seen slamming the yellow ball up against the wall and the Hopi prophecy. I say Hopi prophecy. It is about the Hopi prophecy, the Hopi mural in the Colorado room. So he's actually hit the ball with a bat. And in that case, he's in the role of Ra. He's the good guy in that instance. He's usually the villain, but anyway. So anyway, the concept of the solar eye as mother, consort, and daughter of a god was incorporated into royal ideology. Pharaohs took on the role of Ra, and their consorts were associated with the eye, and the goddesses equated with it. The sun discs and the uri that were incorporated into queens' headdresses during the New Kingdom reflect this mythological tie. Okay, there's lots about it, but I'm not going to say all this. Okay, so yeah, she is his partner, Ra's partner, in the creative cycle in which he begets the renewed form of himself as the sun that is born at dawn every day. Wonderful. The eye's violent aspect defends Ra against the agents of disorder that threaten his rule. As I said, this dangerous aspect of the eye goddess is often represented by a lioness or cobra, a symbol of protection and royal authority. The eye of Ra is similar to the eye of Horus, which we mentioned in another part, to see or not to see, which belongs to a different god, Horus, but represents many of the same concepts. The disastrous effects when the eye goddess rampages out of control and the efforts of the gods to return her to a benign state are a prominent motif in Egyptian mythology. So in that respect, she's also then known as the Eye of the Storm. Wonderful. And there you can see she's conjuring up a storm. And there are elements obviously later of Hecate there as the goddess of the moon. So you've got the sun and it's wonderful. And so the Eye of Ra was involved in many areas of Egyptian religion. I won't go into all of this, but anyway, because we have to keep it pertaining to what we're doing in room 237. So bearing that in mind, a little bit about Apep, which is the serpent. There is a poem about, as I said, he represents chaos, the golden apple of chaos, and dualism, and evil, and injustice, violence. And so this poem from Middle Kingdom was, those who destroy the lie promote Maat. Those who promote the goodwill erase the evil. As fullness casts out appetite, as clothes cover the nude, and as heaven clears up after a storm. In the eyes of the Egyptians, the world was always ambiguous. The actions and judgments of a king were thought to simplify those principles in order to keep Maat. By separating order from chaos, so this is about order and chaos, cosmos, order, chaos is disorder of the cosmos, or good from evil. And this is all in the coffin text and the Book of the Dead, and it speaks of the dead being cleansed of evil in order to be reborn in the duat, which is also the underworld. That's when you get reborn, when you cross 0 degrees Capricorn, the underworld, hell, and then you get reborn, you go up, you resurrect, the soul resurrects. It's all in the stars and the constellations and in the wheel, the zodiac. Anyway, so I won't go into more of that. Apep, very briefly, as it says here, it's enemy of Ra, the Lord of Chaos, the evil dragon. There are good dragons, there are good serpents, but he's the evil giant snake. He's sometimes depicted as a crocodile. Okay. Right, so in this case, in room 237, when Danny enters room, well, Danny seems to, it's not really Danny, as we'll just go on to, which we discovered in the last part. Okay, let's move on. Oh, that's the serpent, that's Apep, which that's the wonderful depiction of Apep. It could be the other serpent too, but that's his depiction of a serpent. That's swallowing the tree, so it probably is Apep in Jung's Red Book. And there's Danny. That's when he's having his traumatized fit. And we went into that last time, where he's having what is a shamanic experience. He might duly, obviously, as Danny, have been attacked and traumatized, but for the purposes of 237, he's actually gone into a shamanic trance. So he's no longer really operating as Danny. His mouth is wide open, and that's the Ru, the 0, but it's also indicating what's called the ceremony of the opening the mouth in ancient Egypt, which we're not going to go into this time, but that's what it's about. So anyway, Danny is now shining, but it's not Danny shining to Halloran. It's very confusing, but it's meant to be confusing. We are very disorientated by the scene, but that's on purpose. So we don't know who's who, and we don't know who's actually having the vision. But what I believe it is, as I said at the end of part 11, was that it's actually Tony who is doing the shining. Tony is, the daemon, and Danny's imaginary friend. So it's Tony who's shining to Halloran in his bed at home in Miami. But as I say here, then you start to think, well, who is Tony? Because Tony has a role as well, and he has more than one role. And in this, he has taken on his role. His secret role was really as Tony, the little boy who lives in Danny's stomach, as he calls him, in the ice cream scene in the kitchen with Halloran. But actually, who is Tony? And Halloran asked Danny, who is Tony? And that gives you a clue that that means something, because who is Tony? Well, Tony is taken over now. And whoever Tony is has taken over. He is the shaman. We do know that, shaman. He is a shining one. So I'll go on to the next. So as that's happening, he's then getting a vision of the blood elevator. This is being shown to Halloran. Tony is showing this. And we'll learn shortly what this particular blood elevator vision is about. They all mean different things, different aspects of mythology or the Bible. Okay. So there's Halloran on his bed just before he gets the vision, shown by Tony. And we went into that last time. That was Lilith that time, and he was Elijah, and she was the succubus. But this time, he's another role. Let's see, this time he's experiencing the initiation, which is the shamanic initiation he's being shown to, and that means the descent. He's being invited, the yellow ball is inviting him, Halloran, to descend into the underworld, into death, through the Daleth, into the Klipoth, the abyss, the tree of death. Okay, so that's his head. We also see his feet there. I wasn't going to do another slide of his feet, but there is another shot then of his feet, and that's to show you we're talking about his head and his feet. Well, that's talking about Aries, obviously, because it's the head of the bed, and the feet are Pisces. So this is saying something, and his feet get focused on. So that possibly could be saying about the age of Pisces, but it is indicating Pisces. Okay, so who's Tony? All the cast in the drama, as I said, have dual roles. Okay, so at this point, as I just said, he's taken center stage, Tony has, and he's shining to Halloran. Halloran is on his bed, as I just said, Aries, his head is in Aries, his feet are in Pisces, and he is in the south, he's in Miami, his apartment in Miami. The hotel is in the north of that. So that means he's in Cancer. He's not at 0 degrees Cancer. So this is the cardinal cross. So he's at 0 degrees Cancer, which means he's at the gates of hell, and he's about to make his descent towards 0 degrees Capricorn, which is the winter solstice, as I said before. So he will descend now. He's being invited to that by the ball, the Eye of Ra. So he's the initiate, which means he's the fool of the tarot, as Jack was in the beginning interview section of the film. He was the fool then, starting his journey. And actually, Jack was, as we saw in the car going up, as I said, he was Osiris. So that means now Halloran has taken the role of Osiris. And we know that because he's on a green bed. And I'm sure many of you know the green bed. Osiris lay on a green bed as the green man. His skin was green. And so we can see that Halloran is Osiris. And above him, it's most probably Isis, I would say. I don't know if anyone has other ideas of this, please chip in. I'd be, happy to know, because there's so much to this. And some things could be wrong, but, I think it's probably right. But anyway, he has birds descending either side of him. The lights, we know the light shades are the birds. Anyway, so I'll go on from that. So he is Osiris, going to make his descent. The blood elevator in this case, we know because of the legend of Osiris. Let's go. as Osiris with his green skin. He's the original green man. And the green man, of course, is the prototype of the dying and resurgent god. And so Halloran is being asked to be the dying and resurgent god. He's taking on the role. So he must go down to hell, like they all did, all the gods that were the dying resurgent god, like Dionysus. Osiris became known as Osiris Dionysus later. And then, of course, there was Attis, and there was Tammuz, and there's a whole bunch of them. And they all died, mostly at the winter solstice, and they were resurrected at the spring equinox. But in that time, they descended. First, they descended. So that's what that's about, all of that. And that's that's another thing that's been lost to, I mean, not to astrologers, thank God, we've held up the torch. But general public, terrible. Anyway, let's press on with that. That's Osiris. So then he goes into the in room 237. So if that's Osiris, most likely that could either be, in this case, I would say Hathor, but I mean, it could be Isis too. She's in the same position as the skier, which is about precession as well. But let's say she's Aphrodite, because Aphrodite in this case was rising from the ocean. So she rises from the waters. The baths are all of these scenes, when there's a bathroom, they represent the primeval waters, they represent the baptism, they represent resurrection, because the initiative goes into the baptismal waters to be cleansed and purified and then resurrected. So anyway, she's rising from the waters, just like Lamia did. So in the first instance. And also you can see that the shape of the tiles, which is the omega shape, and the mirrors in other scenes were the omega shape. And that's representing the alpha and the omega, which is obviously alpha is Aries and in the wheel, on both wheels. And omega is Pisces, because it's the first and the last. Wonderful. So anyway, so there she is rising. Okay, I've done that. Right, so the curtain, the shower curtain is the veil of Isis. So that is pulled back to reveal that there was a Helen Blavatsky wrote a book, The Veil of Isis, and Kubrick did make some referral to that in the chain on the door in the last sequence, the 1942 sequence. But I won't go into that now. But anyway, he has indicated. So this, I would say, is the veil of Isis being pulled back. So in this version of the fugue, this role, the girl is rising out of the bath as either Isis or Hathor, or I would say, as Aphrodite, the Eye of Ra. But she's not the Eye of Ra yet. She's actually in her nice alluring role of Hathor, Venus. Venus, by the way, as I said, is indicated by the green, which is on the Tree of Life, is the color of Netzach. That's why whenever you see green, that's Venus, that's Netzach, which is the seventh Sephiroth. Sephiroth, which in this version of 237, 2 is the second Sephiroth, which is Chokmah, which is ruled by Uranus. They're at the top of the supernal triangle. And Saturn is the third Sephiroth, so it's 2-3. And Saturn rules, as I say, the third, which is represented by the tarot card of the Empress, which is Venus again. So there's a big link between that Sephiroth, second, and the third, and Netzach, which is the seventh. So this is all about Venus. So here she is, Aphrodite, Venus, Hathor. She's rising, and now Jack becomes, in Tony's shining vision to Halloran, Jack becomes Set, going towards her. Set is the murderer of as the blood elevator showed, the murder, that's what the blood elevator means in this instance, the murderer of Osiris by Set. Set meaning Set because it's all about time and it's all about the zodiac. So it's all about Set, the setting sun. Set represents the bad guy who murders the god of the moon and sun, which is Osiris, and sends him down to become lord of the underworld. So Set is the bad guy who murders, along with his 72 conspirators, 72 being the very important number of precession, because it takes 72 years for the precessional sun to go 1 degree of the great wheel. So 72, it's telling you, the myth is telling you what it's about. So there's Set approaching, and let's see, there. Oh, I didn't get the nice bit. I missed the, oh dear, hold on. No, I missed the, no, never mind. Is it there? No, I missed the nice bit where he kisses her, but never mind. You know what that is if you've seen the movie. Anyway, so he embraces her and then sees in the mirror that she's, she becomes this, which is the Eye of Ra, because Set obviously is the bad guy and she's the avenger. So she's actually the good guy in this. She's the Eye of Ra, Venus, who has now turned wrathful against Set, who is out to destroy, who's the enemy of Ra, who is going to murder Osiris. So that's what she is, but she also looks pretty much like the mummy. And of course, that's that's Kubrick's sense of humor, because, you know, obviously Osiris was a mummy. And the other thing about the myth was that he was chopped into 14 pieces, which again is indicative of the cycles of the moon and the sun, because the moon, that's a lunar phase cycle, 14 days, which is 14 pieces. And Isis has to travel all over to find the bits of Osiris and get them back again. And 14 is a very special number. It has a very special significance apart from that, which is in the Bible and in mythology and in the sacred Hebrew numbers. But we'll go into that later. Anyway, so here is Hathor in the role of the Eye of Ra, chasing Set out of the room with in the stance of judgment. She looks like the judgment card too, which is the mummy coming out of the grave, the tarot card. And in this case, she's going to attack Set. Hold on. So the resurrection of Osiris, and I think have I got that? Hold on, no, I didn't. I thought I had that on there. Anyway, the resurrection is in the bath. You see after this shot that she seems, the hag, the crone, you know, you've got the maiden, the crone, the mother, Hecate, the goddess of the moon. This is the part, you know, this is the 237 is the purple in 237 is the Yesod, the part, the moon, the high priestess. So Hathor is also the goddess of the moon. So you see her rising from the bath, but she seems different. She's got short hair. So in that shot, which unfortunately I don't know why I haven't got on there, she's actually represents Osiris rising. Very clever. It's very clever. And that's the resurrection of Osiris. So you see Osiris rising there somewhere. But anyway. Right. So at that point, Set, Jack, he's not really Jack and he's not really Set, he's the vision, the shamanic vision that Tony has sent to Halloran of what is occurring and what will occur, great evil. And so as Set, he stumbles back, he's got his arms out in, as we saw before in the other parts, that pose is the shape of Perseus' arms, and we'll go into that later as well, because that has another meaning. So here's Perseus as well in this. So he's stumbling back and in shock, and he's about to run out. He's about to run, he stumbles backwards already, he goes backwards and then he runs out the door. I don't think I've got that shot, but he runs out the door backwards. Okay, so he runs backwards out the door, and that finally shows that it gives us the identity of Tony. To finish up here, it'll be very long. So the identity of Tony is shown by his running backwards, because he does the same thing in the maze at the end too. He steps backwards in order to defeat the Minotaur, Set, the Apep, the Lord of Chaos, whatever the evil is, the Axeman. So he steps backwards, and that's in the myth. That brings Apollo back, and it brings Mercury into it, because the myth of Apollo and Mercury was the trickster, and also the fool in the tarot. And the trickster, Apollo came across him, and Danny is also Apollo in this, and they became friends, but you could never quite trust him, but he was a useful ally. But anyway, in part of that myth, and I haven't got it in front of me and it's too long, he walks backwards. So that indicates that that's the identity of Tony, that's his true identity, and that's Thoth. So Tony is actually Thoth. And now hopefully you're not totally confused. But anyway, there we go. So he's Thoth, and it's, no wonder that he's guiding he's generating the story here, because he is the master, the original alchemist. He's Hermes Trismegistus, and he's yeah, exactly. So he's the alchemist and the original astrologer of the ancients, and one of the original shining gods. So there we are. So part 13, next time we will have to keep on with room 237, because it doesn't seem to get out of it very quickly, because he's got more to say about it. But anyway, a final quote about Osiris, Horus, Dionysus. The king is, this is an ancient quote, the king is reborn in the glory of the eastern horizon, which is called Akhet, and he who is born in the east becomes the Akh, which is a glorious shining one. Okay, and that's that for now.
Thank you, Michaela.
Thank you. Hope it wasn't too long.